Hello and welcome to Contact. I'm Craig Dullahan. On today's show, our guest is District of North Vancouver Councillor Ernie Crist. Thank you very much for joining us, Ernie.
And thank you for inviting me.
Ernie, you once faced a firing squad. Was that because of your views on the X-Files, or is the council getting less forgiving every year?
No, that was because I was reading a book called Life, which was a Jehovah's Witness book. I didn't know anything about it, but it was against the law. And Jehovah's Witnesses were enemies of the state, and anyone in possession of a book of that nature was automatically executed, unless you had a very, very good excuse. And that was still very young, but those days are long gone, thank God.
What was that like?
What was it like?
Reality?
I wouldn't wish it on my worst enemy. It was an insult to my intelligence. It was an insult. No one should ever live in a society where you cannot express yourself freely. That is, it's just unbearable.
Well, speaking of expression, what do you have against the X-Files?
What do I think of the X-Files?
Yeah, you...
I don't watch it. I don't think it's intellectually stimulating. I don't find it stimulating. But, you know, it's whatever turns you on. But it's not, in my opinion, it's not something that is very enlightening and doesn't lead itself to a higher level of thinking. However, you know, everyone his own.
Now,
each his own.
Was that brought out in some sort of context using either the City Hall or using North Vancouver lands? Remember there was a bit of a...
Well, my point was that we have a film industry in North Vancouver, and it obviously brings jobs, and that's very important for North Vancouver. I have no problem with that. As far as I'm concerned, it's a business like anything else, and they're welcome to do their business in North Vancouver. I welcome that. The problem we had was that they used community facilities at the expense of regular customers, and that's where I had problems. And I didn't think it was appropriate for us to make our community facilities available, including the municipal hall, available to them when they were going in there and produced films that were, showing gratuitous violence. Mm-hmm. On one hand, we have a program, Together Against Violence. We spend taxpayers' money to alert the public to the bad effects of violence and TV violence, etc., etc. On one hand, we're doing that. On the other hand, we told the customers at our recreation facilities, I'm sorry, you can't go swimming today because we have the film industry in there today producing films that depict violence.
Well, do you think television violence has a strong influence on the youth?
Of course it has. Of course, it's a
lot of arguments that it doesn't. But
no, of course it has. You know, I mean, a young person's brain is receptive, and it can be influenced. It's like a child. When a child is very young, they have no compunction of picking up dirt and putting it into their mouth because they don't know any better. And a child watching TV is in the same situation. And you grow up with violence. You think it's normal. You think that's how the world is. It certainly doesn't elevate you or elevate you to a higher level of social existence. I don't think it's the greatest.
Let's talk about some current municipal politics in North Van District of the Heritage Fund. You've compared the district's use of that to a heroin addict basically selling their body to get more drugs. Now, that's a pretty harsh analogy. Why?
Well, because it's true. We as politicians, we have been elected by the public to look after their interests. And when it comes election day, after we were sworn in, we swear to, by God the Almighty, that we will, to the best of our ability, preserve and defend the interests of the public. And so what that means is that we're in a position of trust. So the people's assets should be husbanded. They should be defended. They should be put to its best use, to their best use. And when we sell land, we should put the proceeds into into a heritage fund, and then we should use the interests generated by that heritage fund.
Now, how much money should be in that heritage fund now?
Right now, we could have between 150 and 200 million dollars, and that would generate about $15 million annually. And what we have is nothing after 12 years of existence of that heritage fund, and we have sold $150 million of land in the last 10 years alone, and we have virtually nothing in there.
Now, you've said that 114 million went AWOL. What do you mean by that?
Where what?
114 disappeared, is gone.
Yeah, well, disappeared, you know, and no one stole it. And but the point is, it was used to cover operating expenses. It's like if you're a farmer and you have to sell a piece of your farm each and every year to remain a farmer, you're not going to be a farmer very long. The point is that, and the same thing is in your house. You have you know, the principal. Your house is your principal, the land is your principal, and you will build up the principal, and eventually you will have enough in there so that the house is paid off, and if you want to sell it, you got something to show for it. And then you can live on the interest. That's the general idea. You don't increase the mortgage each and every month so that you can buy your groceries or that you can buy a new car. And that's what we have done. We have used the land sale proceeds to cover operating expenses. That's wrong. That's not very smart.
Now, on our last show, you basically described that as being a bad process, yet when some of the councillors tried to stop those land sales, you actually felt that was a mistake. Can you tell us why?
Well, that was something totally different. What we need is a policy where we decide what are our community objectives, and then you make policies based on that. If we decide that we as a community do not want to sell any more land, then that's fine by me. But to continue or to stop selling land without having an idea as to how we're going to pay for the expenses that we have, in my opinion, is wrong. It's backward. So what we ought to have done is to take stock of all our assets, say this is the situation we have, the financial situation, and these are our community objectives. And now, based on that, we're going to make a policy, and that should be reflected in how we're going to use our assets and our monies and the Heritage Fund. So, generally speaking, however, what we need to do is, it's not necessarily to stop the selling of all lands, not necessarily. But if we do sell lands because we need the money, then we should think, what are we going to do with that money? Should we waste it? Should we use it for operating expenses? Or should we put it into a heritage fund so that the time will come when we have enough money in there that it will generate sufficient interest so that we can pay for all the capital expenditures. And talking about capital expenditures, they're going to be fantastic, enormous. The things that are coming down the road are mind-boggling. We have an infrastructure that is breaking down. That'll cost hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. How are we going to pay for all that? That's why when the Heritage Fund was set up, that was in our mind. We said, you know, the time will come when the land is gone, or when we may not want to sell any more land, and then we should have some money in the bank so that we generate enough interest to pay for all those expenses. But now what has happened is we have squandered.
How did you squander it?
Well, it was used for operating expenses. You know, I mean,
such as?
Well, such as road maintenance and road patching and replacement of a truck.
Now, where should that have come from?
It should have come from taxes. And you know, that raises another question, and people will say, yeah, but that that would have raised the taxes. Not so, because the fact that we have had access to that land sale money has done nothing to improve our efficiency. It has had the opposite effect. It has dulled our pencil. We have become, was easy money. We have become addicted to it. instead of making us sharp, it has dulled our senses. It's like if you have unlimited access to a bank account and you are a junkie, then you're not gonna, there's no incentive for you to quit. Why would you? And you've got a good life. That's what we have done, except it wasn't our money to begin with. If you inherit $1 million and you choose a certain lifestyle and you want to squander it, that's up to you. But we cannot afford that luxury because these are the people's assets, and we are sworn to make the best of it, and we didn't.
Why is the City of North Van's Heritage Fund so much larger?
Well, because they're smarter, more responsible. The city has virtually no land to sell, and yet they have a larger heritage fund than the district. They have $34 or $35 million. The city is small, and as I say, they don't have any land. The district, on the other hand, is rich in land, has been, and we could have hundreds of millions of dollars in the heritage fund by now, and we wouldn't have to sell any more land. You know, we could be sitting pretty now, but instead we have squandered it.
Now, why did you and Pat Monroe not support this year's budget?
We didn't support it because this budget, there were essentially two reasons. The issue of the Heritage Fund money and the land sale money has never been resolved. We're still using it. And the Heritage Fund, instead of growing, is still getting smaller and smaller. I cannot support a budget that relies on the sale of land. It's impossible. There was another thing. Money was taken out from the Heritage Fund to cover for operating expenses, and then there was a big debate on the council about the budget, and of course, you know, everybody has his own priorities, and essentially, and then all of a sudden, while the councillors were fighting for their own priorities, in the last minute, the staff came forward and says, oh, by the way, they said, there is a surplus of $2 million. And so, you know, at that late stage, that was like saying, well, I'm sorry, your bank is empty, and then all of a sudden someone comes in, oh, by the way, you still have $1 million, and there are $2 million. That was something obviously contrived and manipulated. But the main point is this, that money had been taken out from the Heritage Fund, and if there is a surplus, it should have been returned to it. We didn't do that. So we're going to set it aside for next year, and next year we will squander it.
Well, if you don't get into that Heritage Fund, now Mayor Bell and some of the other aldermen have said that if this has to change, but it has to be a slow weaning process over a year or two. Does that mean you got to raise taxes?
Well, no, not necessarily.
Where will you get the money if it doesn't?
The money is
immediately.
No, what it is this: you have to sharpen. You have to sharpen up. You have to wise up. You have to do things smarter. You have to sharpen your pencil. You have to become more efficient. You don't have to cut services, and you don't have to fire people left, right, and center. You just do things smarter. That's what they have to do. That's what you have to do in business, and government should be no different than business. And that's not what we're doing, because there is no incentive.
Well, what are some of the things that could be done, do you think?
Well, for one thing, you know, when you are in private business, and you have, at the end of the day, you will know whether you have been efficient or not, if you have any money in the till or not. That,
now, how could the district?
Well, that's the whole situation. And that's in business. The money is the indicator of efficiency. You either made it or you didn't. And if you didn't make it, you're not, you know, and that happens too often, you're going to be on the way out.
What are some systems in the district?
Well, in the government sector, in the public sector, you have to devise efficiency criteria that are not based on money, but on different criteria, on different efficiency measures. But they can be devised. There was a very famous book called Reinventing Government, which was a sensational work by two Americans. They have dealt with that subject. How can you measure what in the public sector whether what you are doing is efficient and whether it is cost effective? Now, you can't judge it by the amount of money you have made at the end of the day, because you're not in the business for that purpose. So you have to devise different measuring sticks, and that is possible. And in each and every department you have devised measuring devices to measure your efficiency. For instance, and in order to accomplish that, you have to set yourself goals. What is it we want to accomplish? And then you say, oh, these are our goals. Now, what is the cheapest and most effective way of achieving it?
Now, you've often stated amalgamation is probably one
Well,
of the...
amalgamation between the two North Shore municipalities would be has the potential of tremendous money savings for both municipalities, because we're so interconnected and so intertwined that having two of everything instead of one doesn't make sense. You have two councils, you have two administrations, you have two fire departments, you have two of everything. So now, in order to overcome that, the two councils have agreed to share certain services. And on the surface, that sounds good. But in reality, it's not a money saver, because the mere fact that you have these joint services, they have to answer two masters, they have to have two administrations, and then one municipality is handicapped because the other one has a different view on certain things. It's become inefficient, counterproductive, and those shared services are not what they are all cracked up to be.
A lot of jobs, I guess, at least 50% of the jobs go down as far as the bureaucrats, the
well,
councillors.
there's natural attrition. People retire, or people...
Isn't there also less representation with fewer...
I don't think so. No, I do not share that view. I mean, you can represent 50,000 people as well as 10,000 people, in my opinion. But you do have to become, more efficient. There's no question about that.
What's the major issue regarding Hooker Chemical or Canadian Occidental, and why was the DCR project, is that it, OCR project, or think tank, community sponsored group that was supposed to report back to the district bypassed?
Well, we have, under the Municipal Act, we have to have a community plan. And every 5 years, the community plan has to be updated.
OCP.
OCP, yeah. The OCP is the official community plan, is your strategy as to, and your ideas as to what kind of community you want, and then you act accordingly. In other words, you invite the public, you discuss with them what kind of community are we, in what direction do we want to go, why, and what have you. And when you get all this input, you sit down and your planners will produce a long-term community plan. That deals with transportation, with housing, with social issues, and what have you, and where the shopping centers are going to be, and where the recreation facilities are going to be, et cetera, et cetera.
And what happened at Hooker?
Well, what happened here is that when someone comes forward and says, oh, I want to rezone this property, we will say to him, oh, I'm sorry, you can't do that. Oh, you have the right to do so, but you're not going to get anywhere, because the official community plan, it's either contrary to the existing community plan, or the new community plan has not been finished yet, and so therefore it's premature. So you have to wait until we have all this discussion, until the public process is completed, and then we will consider, and if your plans fit in with the new community plan, then we will consider your application. Now, that's how it is done for the ordinary Joe. In the case of Occidental Petroleum, they came forward and they said, we would like to do something, and when the staff said, well, it's contrary to the community plan, they said, well, we're going to do that anyway. And the politicians said, yeah, that's fine by us. In other words, they hijacked the community plan process, and I'm not blaming Occidental for it. I'm blaming us for it, because we are the people who ultimately make that decision. The community plan process was hijacked. It was hijacked to accommodate Occidental Petroleum. Now, what is it Occidental Petroleum wants? Well, first of all, when you debate a community plan, then you should debate what kind of industries you want, and you may decide that certain industries shouldn't be there in the first place. For instance, you might decide, as a community, that Occidental shouldn't be there anymore. Times have changed. They've been there for 50 years. But who wants a chemical plant? It's no longer desirable to have a hazardous chemical plant in the middle of a residential neighborhood. So you may decide that as a long-term project, we want to encourage Oxy to leave. Now, the municipality has the power to institute bylaws and zoning bylaws that will send a clear message to Occidental Petroleum and to the whole world and to the community that although we cannot force you out, the fact is we will do nothing to accommodate you to stay either. You're no longer welcome, not because we don't like you, there's nothing personal involved, you just don't fit in here anymore. Also, it's the kind of industry, it's not the kind of industry that we want. What is it we want? It's not Occidental and the hazardous chemical industry is not conducive to our North Shore environment. We want labor-intensive industries. We want environmentally safe and clean industries. And we want to have industries that beautify the area and make the most of the area and encourage the kind of industries we want. Tourism, for instance, et cetera, et cetera. And Oxy is a barrier. So what we should have said is, but however, let's us as a community debate that. And then when we're ready, we're going to make our plans accordingly. What we have said here is, let's not wait for the public to tell us what they want. Let's hijack the process, let's shortcut it, because Occidental wants us to do something different. What was it that Occidental wanted? Occidental has said, look, we're a hazardous industry and we don't think there is any risk. However, there's always the possibility there. So what we want to do is we want to surround ourselves with industries that suit us. And what are they? Primarily heavy industries, warehouses, etc., etc. And we have said, yeah, that's what we will do. And that's where the mistake was made. And there was no public participation process. There is another thing, of course, and that is Occidental has said, yeah, but we will not prevent, when we surround ourselves with industries, we may get labor-intensive industries. Well, that's of course a red herring, because no one in his right mind will locate adjacent to a chemical industry. You're not going to get a tourist industry adjacent to a chemical plant. You're not going to get high-tech industry adjacent to a chemical plant. You're not going to get labor-intensive and industries, because they're not going to move here adjacent to a hazardous chemical plant. So to the extent that Occidental paid lip service to that idea that we might get desirable industries, it was really designed to confuse the public.
Well, after their Love Canal episode, do you think they're really a very trustworthy partner?
Well, when I first ran for office and I was first elected, the municipality commissioned a report on the hazardous chemical industry in North Vancouver, on the chlorine industry, and it was called the Peak Report. And the Peak Report suggested that statistically speaking, every 23 years there would be a major accident. And depending on the atmospheric conditions and depending on the extent of the accident, there could be casualties of up to 5,000 people, and the affected area could extend from North Vancouver to 41st and Main Street. I mean, that was a worst case scenario. And the council didn't want to release that report, but I blew the whistle. I thought it has to be released. And of course, there was all hell broke loose. But what happened, however, as a result of it, were some good things. And a whole number of things were initiated, including changes in the laws of how you transport hazardous chemicals that have been to the good. I guess what I'm saying is today the chlorine industry is safer than at any time. Mm-hmm. Also, the transportation of hazardous goods today is safer than at any time before. There's no question that they have smartened up as a result of public pressure, that they have done a great deal. Accidents do happen, however. That's not the point. The point is, even with all that, is this a desirable industry for us to have? And that's where the problem comes in. Mm-hmm. We didn't have that debate.
Ernie, we're running short of time, so we're going to go a little bit lighter here. Council just ascertained that some of the councillors have got much stronger bladders than some of those wimpy bus drivers. Why is it that the council is hesitant to build them a biffy up on top of the mountain?
Well, the residents, for one thing, didn't like the idea at all. And they said, well, this is absurd. You know, you people have nothing more important to do than build an outhouse, you know, for lack of a better word, in that part of a residential neighborhood. They objected to it, and that's where it was left. So, you know, sometimes there is the business of being in municipal government today is very challenging and very serious. But once in a while, you know, an item comes up which has the potential for hilarity.
Speaking of challenges, the GVTA, that's going to be a challenge financially. We haven't got much time to talk about it, but are you optimistic that it's going to be a success?
I believe it can be a success, and let me put it this way. I know that the old system was archaic. It was absurd. It didn't work. It can't work when you have a government that is 150 kilometers removed from the scene, doesn't pay for the system, and yet has a say. In other words, why should Victoria decide what kind of transportation system we're going to have in the Greater Vancouver area? For one thing, they're not going to pay for it. It was our money to begin with. The governance was absurd. Those people were appointed, they were not elected. And of course, we have the worst public transportation system in North America. That's the result. So this has changed now. We are in charge. And that is the first step to make the system better.
Ernie, our time's up.
My God, that went fast.
Keep up the good fight.
Well, thank you very much.
Good talking with you.
Thank you kindly.
For Contact and Anderson's Restaurant, I'm Craig Delahunt. Please join us again next time.